Just a Concerned Citizen by Damos on AO3. Chapter 4. Text Message. Izuku woke up past noon, aching all over, which wasn't anything new, but it hadn't happened in quite a while. He could deal with the sore muscles. Sure, they screamed at him as he pulled himself out of bed, but his legs weren't so wobbly that he couldn't walk. If he sat, curled up on the floor of the shower, for 20 minutes, then that was no one's business but his own. When he got dressed, it was in his comfort clothes, a too big present Mike t-shirt, fleece pajama pants, and his hoodie, which he needed to wash now, but he could do that later. Afterwards, he grimly poked at his face in the mirror. It wasn't the worst black eye he'd ever had, but he had a nice, nasty purple bruise that spread all the way down his cheek. He dug his first aid kit supplies out of the cabinet under the sink and went through them with a sigh. There wasn't much he would be able to do besides ice it, and the concealer he used to have to cover up wounds like that had long since expired and been thrown out. He dragged himself across the apartment to open the breezer. Might as well get some ice and make himself something to eat. And if he was going shopping for concealer anyways, he should see what he needed to stock up on. There was a knock on the door, a solid 4 raps on the wood of his front door, that Izuku stared at because he couldn't possibly have heard that. No one came to visit him except his mom, and she would always call him first. His hand flew to his pockets. There was no phone. He hadn't realized. So, who could be outside? Option 1 was the police, which was crazy, but he hadn't actually done anything wrong last night, though he couldn't actually be sure if they would see it that way. He shouldn't run from them. Option 2 was one of the villains, out to get revenge, in which case he should slip out the window and down the fire escape. Option 3 was that his mom had gotten worried that he hadn't responded to a text or something. He shut off the stove, where he had started to boil water, and crept over to the door. He hadn't really considered the peephole useful before, since he never had guests over, but he was thankful for it now, as he stood on his toes and peered out. "Oh," he said to himself softly. "My God." Option 4 was apparently that pro-hero Mindjack was standing outside of his apartment, looking supremely bored and tired. Well, he wasn't going to be able to run from that, even if he really, really wanted to. He called out, mouth dry. Give me a minute." Well, his apartment was already clean, mostly by virtue of the fact that he didn't own much, but he did stumble over his bed to make it with trembling hands. Then he looked down at himself and pulled at his hoodie with a grimace. Probably not a good idea to greet the pro looking for you in the clothes you were almost a vigilante in last night. He pulled it off and put it in the laundry hamper, and then took a moment to bury in some of his old clothes. There was nothing else for him to do to delay what felt like the inevitable death, so he went back to the door and unlatched the door lock and put his hand on the doorknob. Oh, God. He was going to cry. A pro-hero was at his door, which would have been enough on its own, but he was here because Izuku did something bad enough to send him here. And he had been emailing Mindjack, so the hero definitely had to be able to connect what happened last night to the person who'd been sending the tips. His fist tightened on the doorknob, and so his knuckles were white. He took a shuddering breath. It was fun while it lasted. What he had to focus on right now was not bursting into tears in front of a pro that he had been idolizing for years. He pulled the door open a few inches, enough for the hero to look in. Wow, yeah, his eyes really were purple, and locked eyes with him. Mindjack? Hi." Izuku bit his lip hard, trying to figure out what would make this easier. Do you want to come in?" If the hero was surprised that he had been recognized, he didn't show it. Even by underground hero standards, his costume was low-key. A black jumpsuit and a dark purple hoodie, hood up. His capture weapon could easily be mistaken for a scarf. The only thing about his costume that could be considered recognizable was his mask that covered the bottom half of his face, medical bits mimicking fangs. It shouldn't have been so hard for Izuku to stop himself from asking about the support item given the circumstances. As it was, the underground hero gave him a slight nod, so Izuku pulled the door open wider so he could step through. He shut the door behind the pro, who was being blatantly obvious about looking around the room, looking for things out of the ordinary and exit points, no doubt. But he didn't say anything. Even as Izuku stepped around him to go stand awkwardly in the kitchenette, suddenly he was feeling very self-conscious about his little apartment. It was a little plain, he knew. The only real bit of decoration he had were the printouts on the wall of his heart did a weird scatical beat because Mindjack and his classmates were on his walls, and the hero, and definitely had seen it. Oh my god. If this wasn't bad enough. Can I get you anything? Tea? Coffee? His voice was high and wavering, and there was a slight tilt of the man's head at the second option. Then, a blaringly perceivable sigh. No, but thank you for the offer. He was expecting the voice, and oh, it was deeper than he thought it would be. The sound more muffled by the mask, but it came out perfectly clear. Mindjack had apparently finished cataloging everything in the room because he turned to catch Izuku staring. He could only hold the pro's gaze for half a second before his eyes fell to his hand. The man didn't speak again, and the silence started to stretch uncomfortably long. Just because Izuku knew the tactic the hero was using on him didn't mean it didn't work. So, did you need something, Mindjack, sir? A nod. You dropped this. Thro reached into a pocket and held something out to him. It took Izuku an embarrassingly long time to realize that it was his cell phone. He reached for it, like it was going to bite him, but Mindjack let him take it without issue. Thank you. He held eye contact for a little longer this time, and it was actually the pro who broke it, eyes flickering down to the phone in Izuku's hands. No problem. You're the one who's been sending the emails, right? It took everything in him for Izuku not to collapse to the floor right there and then. Cool, okay. His worst fear had come to pass. He had died last night and woken up in hell. That was the best explanation. He managed a mere little nod, and when there wasn't an immediate response, very brightly blurted out, I didn't do anything illegal. Oh, God. This was the worst. He was the worst. You didn't. Mindjack agreed. He sounded almost amused. That gave Izuku the courage to peer up at where the pro was leaning on the counter. With only his eyes visible, the man was hard to read, but it was clear he was trying to make himself look non-threatening. Shoulders pulled down, hands in front of him, which was nice, but Izuku couldn't figure out why. I'm not going to lecture you about how what you've been doing is dangerous, the hero continued, then gestured at Izuku's face. I'm pretty sure you already know that, but you know I'm a hero and everything. I have an obligation to keep you safe. So if something like that happens again, you call me instead of running out there and getting hurt, okay? Call? You? Izuku couldn't force his voice much louder than a whisper. I took the liberty of putting my phone number in your phone. Yes. Hopefully you won't need to use it, but... Izuku heard the hero shrug more than he saw it, with his eyes now locked in the reflection of his face on the screen of the battered old phone. Just don't go running into any criminals yourself. More than you already have been, I mean. Izuku wouldn't have been able to make himself respond to that if someone has a gun to his head. Mindjack didn't seem mad, and it sounded like he expected him to continue. To keep figuring out crime and sending emails? But if he was here, that meant he knew who he was. That had to be some kind of joke, or something. It didn't seem to be. The bro just took a long moment to quietly appraise him. He couldn't look good. The only reason Izuku hadn't started to cry was because he had shut his eyes almost shut. I have another question for you, and you don't have to answer this one if you don't want to. Mindjack had stepped away from the counter to cast another glance and a questioning hand around his tiny apartment. Why do things like this? I'm sure you can get hired at any agency in the country with your skills. Izuku would remember that comment and blush at it later, but in the moment, he focused his tongue to unstick itself from the roof of his mouth and reply, in a voice rough with emotions. It's not that easy for someone like me. The only explanation for the fact that the feeling that flashed through the hero's eyes was understanding, or really, for this entire interaction, was that Izuku was hallucinating. He had gotten knocked out when he got punched, and this was all some kind of dream. Only if this were a dream, he'd long since would have woken himself up in a flustered panic with the way the pro's eyes were fixed on him. Then, Mindjack blinked and took another step towards the door. Right. I think that was all. Stay safe. Don't do crime. Izuku was aware that the hero had cast another glance towards him in a vague sense. It felt like his brain was being held underwater. That information only came in broken waves. Call me if you need anything. Oh, and the girl from last night said thanks for the help. Mindjack let himself out of Izuku's tiny apartment, without any more fanfare. As soon as the door was closed, Izuku sank to the floor, clutching his phone to his chest like a lifeline. What the hell was that? First, he cried, not from any specific emotion, more of a mix of every emotion. When he finished crying, he looked through his phone to find that, yes, actually, the pro hero, Mindjack, had put a contact in his phone, and he started crying again. Happier tears this time. But by the time he was finished, he spent an hour on the kitchen floor and was feeling exhausted and hungry. By that point, he had recovered enough for him to let his body into autopilot through the process of making himself rice and miso soup as he got his things back together. Right. So, one of the pro heroes he'd been anonymously emailing had found him and didn't seem to plan on making him stop. Seemed to expect him to continue, actually, and had given him his phone number. Obviously, so that he wouldn't do anything as stupid as he had last night, of course. Oh, and he had helped someone. He wasn't sure he believed that part, yet. Izuku knew he had a bad habit of forming celebrity crushes on pro heroes. It was nothing major, nothing he couldn't deal with, more fun than anything else. The bigger problem was that he also tended to develop a crush on anyone who was nice to him, and those tended to be much harder to deal with. Mindjack was a pro hero, and had, obscenely, been nice to him, had given him his phone number. In any case, not that Izuku would ever use it, but still, he did have it. That almost overrode the embarrassment he felt over the fact that the hero had seen the homemade merch Izuku had on his wall of him and his classmates. Once he had gotten over the fear and the shock, Izuku rode that high to the grocery store to buy concealer and eggs, and then to home, to his laptop, where he got back to work. From Concerned Citizen 81904 to Earphone.Jack. Subject: Missing Person Cold Case. Kano Misery. Hello, this case was dropped long before you ever became a hero, but I believe I just found photo/video evidence that Kamo is alive, well, and possibly a member of the Yukazai. Files attached. Class A group chat. Please do not change this. Pikachu 2. Guys, @TiredTM is being so mean to me. He made me do all this stuff to find about the citizen, and now he won't tell me anything. Sexier xenomorph. Ooh, what? At Tired TM, give us the deets. Are they cute? Are they evil? Frog. I hope that they aren't evil. Their messages have been very helpful. Tired TM. I really have to mute this chat. This is when I sleep, you know. Also, I'm not telling anyone anything because you fuckers wouldn't know about protecting the identity of an informant if you took a whole lesson on it. Which you all have, might I add. Sexier xenomorph. Hey, it's not like that. Just wanna know what's got you so interested in them. Smiley face. Tired TM. Please, like, I'm the only one. In the interest of being able to get some sleep, I'll tell you this. They're not a criminal. Not a vigilante either, although it's kind of a close thing. So still keep me updated if they message you. But do it in 8 hours. Pin me again, right now, and you're blocked. That Friday, when he called his mom, Izuku wasn't sure what to say. He hadn't been mentioning his nightly online criminal hunts or the emails. They weren't a big deal, and they would only make her worry. Except, this week, they had become a big deal. They brought a pro straight to his apartment. He asked her how her week had been, and she rambled on about some petty dispute some of her coworkers were having over stolen lunches. Her mom expected it to escalate to the point where someone would end up lacing something with hot sauce. All the while, his mind was racing as he tried to figure out what to say to her. He had never outright lied to his mother about anything, but he had a long history of withholding things from her. She had always been so worried about him when he came home hurt, and when he learned to cover it up, she'd stopped crying and had gotten so much happier. So she didn't need to know about the fact that he had gotten punched in the face. The bruise would most likely a faded cross yellow color by now, and would be long gone before he went to visit her again. So, she didn't need to know about the emails, because she was already concerned he was spending so much time online as it was. Midoriya asked, "So how was your week, sweetie?" "Good," he said, which was not a lie. "I saw a pro earlier this week." "Oh, at the bookstore?" He felt guilty that she made it so easy. He didn't even have to actually lie. He just didn't have to disagree. "It was Mindjack. You know, the underground one from UA?" "Oh, goodness. They must have been surprised you recognized them then," his mother said in a tone of someone who was supportive, but who didn't know what the conversation was about. "Did you get their autograph?" "Oh, no, I didn't." He laughed, nervously but genuine. "I should have. I was too scared." "Oh, well, you'll get it next time," his mother said. "I'm gonna start dinner. Did anything else happen this week?" Yes, he thought, even if his mouth said, "Not much. Talk to you soon, Mom." "You too, dear. Have a good weekend." He hung up the call and let out a shaky breath. Izuku stared at the screen, fully intending to guilt trip himself over lying to his mother. Instead, his eyes were drawn to the top, where he had a notification of a text, which was unusual. He must have had gotten it when he was on call with his mom, but she was the only one who ever texted him, so who? From Mindjack. "By the way, if the tabs I'm keeping are right, you have one of the highest success rates for cases of any analysis working in the industry right now." What? In his mind, he had listed the hero's number as something to be used in emergency only, which meant that he was actually going to be very careful and never have to use it. But the hero had texted him, and texted something like that, and he couldn't for the life of him figure out why. And he had opened the message, which meant that he knew he had seen it, which meant he had to reply fast. So he didn't seem weirder than he already was. He typed with shaky fingers. I don't know if that's true. He winced. He didn't mean to call the pro a liar. Sent. If it was, that's just because I'm picking up cases no one is looking at. And I get to pick them myself. There was an agonizing 2 minutes of no response. And then, from Mindjack. I guess that could be the case. Or, you just don't tell anyone anything until you know you're right. Which is all well and good, but you don't have to do that. Well, not with me, anyways. Don't hesitate with info that could save someone's life. Izuku sniffled and wiped at his eyes. Sent. I won't. They met! Oh my god, they met! Hi, hello. Also, I've just been made aware that because Just a Concerned Citizen is a privated, not a privated, but like one of those locked fan fictions where you have to forcefully have an AO3 account to read it, some people are not able to read ahead. A certain person who always likes to read ahead and then listen to my podfics informed me when I was in a VC with them, just like, yeah, Just a Concerned Citizen, waiting for the episode to come out because I can't read ahead. Yeah, that's the point. You can't really read ahead because it's locked. Anyways, just wanted to mention that. This was a super interesting chapter. It was a bit longer than the rest. I'm gonna be honest with you. That little scroll bar in the side, it is a catfish. It looks like the size of a bar that would normally be a 40, 50 minute video up to an hour of a video, and it ended up being 21 minutes. I thought this series I would have to break up into parts and pieces, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to, I don't think I'm gonna force to do that. I don't think I'm gonna be forced to do that. That's what I was trying to say. I can't freaking, speak? That. I can't, my words aren't wording, but yeah. So, Hitoshi and Izuku have each other's phone numbers. Would you look at that? Isn't that interesting? Also, the fact that Hitoshi texted Izuku first meant that he also put Izuku's number in his own phone number, which is something that completely flew by me my first read. And sitting here and reading this, like, oh my god. So, although I have read Just a Concerned Citizen, it has been a couple months, so a lot of it has been lost on me. There's some fan fictions where I remember the premise, I remember some of the big key plot points, but there's small little tidbits that I completely forgot about, and I'm sitting here and reading, and I was like, oh right, I forgot about this little instance, haha, funny, right? It's not the same as reading it for the first time. I haven't forgotten it completely, but it's just those like, oh, kind of forgot that this happens, and I'm just reminded of that. But yeah, this is a very interesting chapter, and I wonder where this is gonna lead. I hope you guys had, a nice time listening to this. I really enjoy this series, and I'm happy that I was able to podfic this. I think this was one of my first Shindeku fanfics that I read, that I started categorizing my fanfictions, or cataloging my fanfictions, which is something I do. I catalog every fanfic I have read, not just for my channel, but just in overall. I catalog every single fanfiction. I put the tags, I put what rating I give it, I put the summary, I put the author, how many words, how many chapters, the name, all of that, and then I categorize it by ships and stuff like that. It's how I know how much fanfics I've read a month. It's how I know how much fanfics I've read a year. It's how I know which fanfics I'm reading more of. Like, for example, 2023, I seem to enjoy gen fanfics a whole lot more than any other type of fanfics. And most of the gen fanfics ended up being Dadzawa fanfics, if I'm being honest with you. Dadzawa fanfics. I actually haven't read that many Shindeku fanfics, considering I really, really enjoy Shindeku. It's one of my favorite ships, if I'm being honest. It used to be BKDK. Like, I used to really, really like BKDK. It's why I almost have 2 million words of BKDK. But for some reason, Shindeku, I have 1 million of Shindeku. 1 million words of Shindeku, right? It's going up there. I'm really liking Shindeku. I don't know, it's just an interesting dynamic that I would love to see more of, And Eraser Mike, although Eraser Mike is lower. Eraser Mike, I've only read 500k words of it, almost 600k, which is on the lower amount considering, 2,000, 1,000, or the fact that I've read 3,000, almost 4,000 words worth of Gen fanfiction. But yeah, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.